Hey guys, today I'm joined by Alex Cartmill, the head coach of the Online Trainer Academy. And maybe you can tell a little bit more about yourself, Alex.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me, man. Really appreciate it.
No worries.
As you mentioned, I'm the head coach of the Online Trainer Academy, which is basically a business development program for personal trainers that shows them how to build an online training business. It takes their craft and their skills that they already have and says, hey, how can you take what you have already and deliver these services online and work with people remotely?
I love that you say like you help people who already have a certain craft and a certain skill level, because I remember in one of Jonathan Goodman's book, he talks about you have to have at least 1 year experience training people one-on-one before you go to online personal training. Now, what's your opinion on that? Do you also have the same recommendation? And why is that? Why 1 year specifically?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's certainly nothing magic about 1 year. We kind of put that number out there to provide some structure to people reading and say, hey, you should have some experience. And that's certainly true. And the reason is when you're personal training in person, you're reactive. You're able to see something that's happening in front of you, and you're able to see if a fix is going to actually fix it. And if it doesn't, then you can try something else and see if that fixes the problem. And you're able to resolve things a lot quicker because they're standing right in front of you and you have that luxury. When you move online, you just don't have that luxury. You're not directly in front of the person. And so now you're in a proactive environment where you have to understand what's going to happen before it happens. If someone is an office worker and they have tight hip flexors, that means when they squat, this is going to happen. This is going to happen. You have to make note of that in their program when you're delivering it to them online and say, if you feel this in your calves or in your hips or in your back, make this adjustment and see if that helps. And so you kind of just have to have a deeper understanding of training and programming in order to succeed online. Is it 100% necessary? There's certainly people who learn to become a good trainer online. It's just a lot more challenging and a longer road because you're in that proactive environment and not reactive. So this is exactly why we make that recommendation. I certainly agree with it. And it is much more about the programming than anything else. If you feel comfortable that you can get your clients results and you feel comfortable that you understand their problems and can handle a wide variety of programming, that's really the main piece too. Of course, also when you're experienced, you are just a better communicator. You're able to read between the lines better, and which is also things that's going to help you excel in the online space too. So more often than not, experienced trainers do better. But that's really the root of that recommendation. And absolutely agree with it. There's a lot of people, as I'm sure you've seen, who lose some weight themselves and are like, all right, great, I can be an
Let's
online
be a
trainer
personal
now.
trainer. Let's do it. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's what we call fitness influencers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's a slippery slope, man, because then a huge part of what I try to do is legitimize the online training space because, it's simply a different environment than in person, and it has certain advantages and disadvantages. But also, there's a lot of connotations around it. Even within the fitness industry, there's a lot of negative viewpoints around it. And so if there's that divide in the fitness industry, to the general public, they're never going to understand and they're never going to fully embrace it as a legitimate tool. And so that's a huge part of my job. And a lot of that on the other side is fueled by those fitness influencers, and the barrier to entry is so low. And so we try to get online trainers to a position where they're actually coaching in a great way like they do in person, but just simply in a different environment.
Yeah, exactly. That's a very great approach. Now, one of the questions I've been getting like the most by far is, hey, what software should we use to start online personal training? And I always recommend just the ones that I use, which
Sure.
I've been looking into, which is Trainerize, TrueCoach, and Virtua Gym. But maybe you can, because as experts in that field, maybe you can recommend some softwares as well for our viewers.
Yeah. So there's a lot of great software. Happy to list. You name some. There's certainly Trainerize. There's TrueCoach. PT Distinction is another really great one. There's Total Coaching is another great one. When it comes to software, there's probably 10 or so that are up in that upper tier.
So how do you decide? Maybe that's the better question. How do you decide?
Exactly. So the first step is figuring out what you want it to do for you. If you go in looking through the lens of what's the best software that I need to find, it's going to be really hard because 90% of them are going to have the same functionality, and they're going to have different bells and whistles that will have different features and functionalities. And so coming in with, okay, I needed to do these 3 things for me. I needed to be able to send videos. I needed people to be able to check in via the workout, via the app. I needed to track these metrics. Okay, great. Then you can go in and start your search of, does this software check off these 3 boxes? Perfect. Hop on a free trial and just run with it. Most people spend far too long thinking about what's the best software to use.
I totally agree. Like, we overthink that kind of stuff. It's crazy.
Totally.
Just go with it, and you can always
and the
change
outcome's
as well,
going to be the
so,
same.
Yeah. Like, worst thing that can happen, I think that's great advice, is like, you choose a software, you go for it, you try the trial for 2 or 3 weeks, make sure you try it with your clients, and then you just see if it works for you. And then if it doesn't, then you switch. But I think a lot of people really overthink it. And
for sure. And that's the same mentality with a lot of different things. You know, it's the same mentality with, what website host do I use? What payment processor do I use? If you understand that what you want to accomplish for you, pick one that does it and go. And that's not to say that if you find a reason to not do it anymore, or you spot holes in the systems, or you're like, wow, this process is really annoying for me, you can always switch.
Exactly.
And then when you switch, you're going to have a better understanding of, okay, this is really annoying to me. So when I switch, I need my software.
You know what you need. Yeah, exactly.
Do this, and then you can go and do that. So we spend way too much time on the front end trying to figure out the best. And there really is no universal best. They're all slightly different. And so just having that understanding beforehand is my best recommendation, because it's so easy to get lost in the weeds with all that.
Totally. I remember when I started as a personal trainer, I tried them all. Like, in 1 month, I just asked for a tryout for every software that there was at that point, and I tried them all, and then I made the decision. But looking back, I spent way too much time on that. So that's good advice.
Well, and they do have trials too, like we said. So you can test what it's going to look like from the trainer perspective and from the client perspective. You can see it. And so if you enjoy it and you like the functionality, and that's another piece to look at too, is, do you hate using it, or do you actually think it's fun to navigate and use? Because if you despise it, it's probably not going to be a sustainable route for you either.
You did talk a little bit about websites. I think that's another very important topic. I know, like, for a fact, a lot of personal trainers who start out, they are thinking about creating this fancy website. They spend a couple €1,000 or dollars or whatever currency you're using on it. But is having a great website, is that a priority? Or as an online personal trainer, where would you spend your first money? What's the main focus to get visibility online? Maybe that's also a great topic to talk about marketing wise. Yeah,
for sure. So websites are great. I kind of lump them in with Facebook ads and other tactics like that. It's great. I certainly think a website, having it sort of be a brochure website where it helps legitimize what you do. It gives people a platform to go to find you on, who might not know who you are, and have a nice outline of your services. A lot of positives to it. Is it a top priority? No, certainly not. We have a lot of students in the Online Trainer Academy who don't have a website at all and are making more than they could have imagined via online training. What's truly important is relationship building. That's going to be the foundation of everything that you do. If the goal of the website, sure, if you have great SEO tactics and people find your website via Google and you can get a lot of traffic, maybe that can be the foundation of your business, and that's amazing if it is. For most people though, building genuine relationships with people over time is going to be the foundation that allows you to run your business for 5-10 years to come. Because where the problem lies with the immediate tactics versus the long-term tactics is often they contradict each other. What's going to get you clients through the door right now might not be what's going to have you building a sustainable business for the next 5 to 10 years. And so it's definitely a part of finding that balance, but so certainly not a top priority. Great to have, but when it comes down to it, starting to connect people. And so many people ask, where do I even start with online training? And it's almost two separate conversations, because the online training piece, the back end business piece, that's easy. You need a software, you need a payment processor, you need a way to deliver services, you need a way to communicate. That's the easy part. But then when it comes to how do I get people to work with me, well, that's a whole separate conversation. And there's such a huge variance.
And you're totally right with building relationships. It's something that I see people doing wrong all the time. It's they have an audience, they have an advertisement, and they say, here's my product, buy from me, without introducing themselves, without giving value. So it's like you have to warm up the audience. That's the basics of marketing. So I think that comes very close to what you say about building relationships. But how do you start?
Immediacy piece too.
Yeah, exactly.
Of like, we want to sell as quickly as possible. And as soon as your audience thinks this person's just trying to sell me, it's so hard to overturn that. The longer you can delay the ask and provide value, the better.
Exactly. Totally agree with that. But there's also the other aspect, besides like introducing yourself, providing value, building relationships. There's also the other aspect of choosing your niche. And that's something that I really learned from OTA. I think that's for me, that was the biggest game changer in my previous business. It's like deciding who you want to work with and being able to be different online, because there's way more competition than offline. That's a fact. So how do you stand out? Maybe you can talk a little bit about the power of niche and how you can determine your ideal customer.
Yeah, for sure. So a niche is certainly important. What I've found during my time in OTA, which, by the way, I've been the head coach there for 4 years now. So I've worked with just the gamut of students and situations. And what's truly important, it's less important from the start, at least, that you narrow it down from a demographic standpoint. It's great if that's who you're working with anyway. If you know you work with golfers who are a certain age, great, stay with that. If you don't really know and you kind of work with Gen Pop, what I find is more helpful to think about, rather than what age and gender and job do they have, even though that's helpful, is what situation are they going to be in that's going to trigger them to want to work with you, and what problems do they really want to solve? What version of themselves do they want to become by working with you? And if you're able to understand that, I find the demographic side comes easier. But what's so powerful there is you're able to speak the language of the people you want to help. It's very common for people to want to stay general and to move towards the middle and say, I'm going to post content and I'm going to communicate in a way that speaks to everyone. And while you do that, you're simultaneously speaking to no one, because no one's resonating with what you're saying, because it's a general way of talking. On the flip side, though, once you identify who you really want to work with, that simultaneously means you're not going to be speaking to some people. The language that you use is going to not resonate with some of the people who read it, who are outside that niche. And a lot of people think that's a negative because they want to please to everyone. But at the same time, while it's not speaking to someone, it's resonating a lot more.
Of course, yeah. And you can't let the fear of missing out getting in the way, because like you said, it's better to work with the few that actually you enjoy working with, instead of having a full agenda with like people you don't enjoy working with and then drain your energy. So
right. And it's so much harder to move the needle for people to actually work with you when you speak to everyone. And I mean, that's the real power of the niche, is it gives you direction in terms of how do you communicate with people? What types of content do you post? What value are these people even looking for in the first place? If you're trying to talk to everyone, there's going to be way too many options and you're going to stay in the middle. And that's where people start competing with other people, is when they don't separate themselves like that. And kind of the other side to that is, what makes you different as a coach?
Exactly.
We have a piece called the 1% uniqueness factor, which is, why are you a different / better coach than someone who offers the same services as you? Why would someone pick you over another coach who has?
I really like this topic. Really like this topic because a lot of starting personal trainers, one thing I also hear a lot is like, can I even make a business out of this? Isn't the market already saturated? Because there's so many people. Like if you look on your list on Facebook, you probably have like 5 or 6 trainers at least that offer some kind of personal training. And they come to me and they say like, I'm not sure if I'm going to start with personal training, especially not online, because there's too many. Now, what would your reply be if I was a student in OTA and I would have you as a coach? What advice would you give me?
I would say you're absolutely right if you don't separate yourself. And there's only one you in this entire world. and who has have your life experiences and has your perspective and your thoughts and whatever it may be. There's only one of you, and take advantage of that as much as possible. Be your authentic self, showcase who you are, not only as a professional and what makes you different as an authority, but also you as a human being too, and who you are as a person outside of fitness, and utilize your uniqueness. One, recognize it. And for some, that takes thinking. It's not something that we think about all that often. So recognize it and then capitalize on it, and don't be afraid to alienate some people in the process. If someone doesn't resonate with who your authentic self is, then they're probably not going to work with you anyway. And it's probably not the person that you want to work with regardless.
Exactly.
And so I would say that's when you stop competing, is when you can figure out what that space is. Because if you try to speak to everyone and go towards that middle, that's what everyone's doing. So now you are competing with that random woman who's offering fat loss services in Texas, because you guys are both speaking to the general masses, and people are going to lump you in the same. But if you create your identity for yourself and understand what it is, and then carve out your own corner has the foundation of that identity, then you're competing with way fewer people.
Exactly, which is so important. I see we have a few minutes left. So because a lot of people actually struggle with like narrowing down their niche and they go way too broad. Can you maybe give like 3 very good examples of students of the OTA that you remember out of the top of your head that have been very successful with a very narrow niche? Because like I said, many people are afraid of going too narrow, but you can rarely go too narrow, especially because it's online training. You're not bound to your local village. You can go way wider.
You can rarely go too narrow, for sure. And I mean, think of it this way, and I'll give some examples too from OTA, but if you're looking for the best spicy tuna sushi roll, and there's 3 restaurants, and one is a general Japanese restaurant that sells all types of food, and they have a spicy tuna roll. There's a sushi place that has all sushi rolls, and they have a spicy tuna roll too. And then there's a place that only has spicy tuna rolls. If you're looking for spicy tuna rolls, that's a no-brainer. And that's the exact situation with the niche. I mean, we have people in the OTA who, for example, they might only work with firefighters who are preparing for a certain physical exam, or people who work with one type of athlete who are preparing for one type of event, or people who work with, a very tight age range of executives in a certain industry, because you become the go-to in that sphere. You are now, if I am that person and you specialize in that specific piece, then of course I'm going to go to you over someone who says, I help people lose fat, versus, I help C-level executives who are 35 plus, who have a family, lose fat. Sure, that's gonna not speak to some people, but the people it does speak to, it's gonna move the needle for them so much more, and you're able to just, so certainly. Now I will say, to kind of round out that conversation, at the start it can be beneficial to be broad, and for that reason is, for a lot of people to get going and get their first few clients, it comes from their existing network. And so, understanding your niche is great, and you can always find your niche and understand where they hang out online and integrate yourself in their communities. But starting broad can be really beneficial in terms of capturing people who might be ready to work with you now, where that trust is already built in. And so again, if that is the case and you're just starting out and you want to start broad, I think that's totally fine. But think more about what problems you're solving for people, as opposed to, I'm going to start broad and saying, I help people lose fat. It's like, start broad on the demographic side of things, but still be specific on the problems that you're solving and the situations that they're going to be in. And then you can always narrow down the demographics from there. And oftentimes it helps you understand who's going to be attracted to that language, and you as a trainer.
And it's also a good trick to be able to create killer content, because if you know the problems of your dream client and their avatar, you can actually create content that helps them get closer to their goal, even for free, but you show you're the expert. And I think that's also a very important point.
Absolutely.
Okay, I see our time is running up, Alex, so I'm going to let you go. Maybe any few last tips before you go?
I would say the biggest thing is, if you're thinking about online training and you want to get started with it, take imperfect action. We have a book actually that I co-authored with John Goodman called The Wealthy Fit Pro's Guide to Online Training, and it's a really good
I have it in my bookcase. It's a good
intro.
one.
Yeah,
I can recommend it.
It's just a really good intro to what you kind of need to get going with it, and it's really easy to stay on the other side and not do anything at all. But if you've ever had a thought about it or ever have any interest in it, this is kind of my encouragement to take one step forward, as that's all you can do. But I think that's the last piece.
Okay, so read the book and take imperfect action. I think that's a great roundup for this conversation. Hey, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time, Alex. If people want to follow you or want to know more about your OTA, where can they find you?
Yeah, so they can go to theptdc.com. The Personal Trainer Development Center is the company where the Online Trainer Academy falls under. You can find all of us there, and then happy to connect personally as well. Alex Cartmill on Facebook and Instagram. More than happy to connect there.
Great. It was great having you, Alex. Thank you for the value. Thank you for taking time for us, and we'll talk again soon. Bye-bye.
Of course. It was great to chat with you.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
Take care.